Good morning, everybody. It's an honor for me to MC today's first Coffee with the Candidate series. Uh, it's I'm Eldon Callen, General Counsel and Vice President for Public Affairs for the Morgantown Area Partnership. The partnership is a public-private alliance for the betterment of economic, business, and community development in the Monongalia County area. It's comprised of the Morgantown Area Chamber of Commerce, the Monongalia County Development Authority, the Morgantown Area Economic Partnership, and the Campus Neighborhood Revitalization Corporation, otherwise known as the Sunnyside Up. It's a partnership that takes a holistic approach to business, economic, and community development and focuses on creative strategic solutions to our growing community. As such, we focus on many policies and issues. As an organization combined of public and private entities, we do not endorse candidates. However, we focus very strongly on the policies and issues that are important to our members. We have membership that are approximately 500 businesses and organizations in the community, and we focus on those policies and issues at the state, local, and federal level that make a difference to the not only to our membership but to the entire region and state level that will create not only a community for our people today, but for our children, our grandchildren into the future. We are privileged to have today the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate, Paula Jean Swearengin. Thank you for coming. You will have an opportunity to tell more about yourself. I want to acknowledge, however, that she is the daughter of a UMWA coal miner and granddaughter, and I guess niece. I want to make that acknowledgement because I'm a son, grandson, and nephew of UMWA coal miners. So I had to take that privilege to make that acknowledgement, being also from UMWA family. But as I said, you'll have an opportunity to tell more about yourself. I also want to take this opportunity to introduce our moderators for today, our chairs of our Governmental Affairs Committee, Elizabeth Durr, also affectionately known as Libby. She's the head of External Affairs, Regional Director for a 9-county region here in West Virginia. She's very active in governmental affairs. She does so many things for us. We just can't help but thank her for her effort and her dedication and time for the partnership and for the entire community. We also have Daniel Miller. He's a senior scientist with Potesta and Associates, an environmental engineering firm here and in Charleston, and they're one of the leading firms throughout the state and throughout the region. He does also so much for our community and our region. I want to also point out that this is being recorded. We have people in the audience that have submitted questions. We also have legislative priorities that's been established over the years by our membership. I always send it out to all the candidates. I don't believe in surprising the candidates. We will have those, not only those questions, but we like to we like to have thoughtful answers. These recordings will be posted on our website, and many people come to that website and review and review the candidates' answers afterwards. So again, I thank you for coming today, Ms. Swearengin, and I will turn it over to our moderator now.
That's Libby and I guess, right?
Yes, Libby and Dan.
Okay. Well, Paula, thank you for joining us. And as Eldon mentioned, we'd like you to just explain a little bit of your background and why you have decided to run for the U.S. Senate representing West Virginians. So we'll give you at least 5 minutes, and you can talk about a little bit of your background and the reason that you were motivated to run.
Good morning, and I'm really excited to be here and having coffee with you guys. My story is I am a poor coal miner's daughter and granddaughter, and I've lived with the boom and the bust of the market. My dad was in the coal mines. Like Mr. Callen said, my dad worked in the coal mines. My stepdad, my grandpa was a proud UMWA member. He was in the coal mines for 45 years. And, most of my uncles, I think we've researched it dates back 5 or 6 generations that my family worked in coal. And I got active in trying to advocate for economic diversity, clean water, clean air, all these things that we need here in West Virginia, because I am a single mother and a grandmother. And I've lived with the boom and the bust in the market for coal. And, right now we're at a point here in West Virginia that we need economic diversity. We had over 140,000 coal miners in the 70s. We have less than 50,000 nationwide. And the Industrial Revolution was built on the backs of West Virginians, their families, and surrounding communities. And you go out into the coalfield areas now, there is no just transition. There is no economic development. The rug's been pulled out from under us after, a lot of these people got rich off their backs and left us breadcrumbs. People live in impoverished conditions comparable to a third world country. They have cardboard for windows. I drank polluted water when I was a little girl, and a lot of people don't have access to clean water around the state. Even up in the northern panhandle, with Weirton Steel and the market decline, people are suffering there in that area. And we're dealing with one of the largest addiction crises in the country. And we've seen a movement of people like myself that are ordinary people that are stepping up and running for office. Here on a local level with the West Virginia Can't Wait movement, we had 93 candidates to run. In 2020, 43 of those candidates won their primaries, and nobody has taken corporate PAC dollars. And on a national level with organizations like Brandon Congress, I'm still on that slate too, and we all pledge not to take corporate back dollars. And we're at a pivotal time with our government. We've had for far too long people that are serving corporations and lobbyists as opposed to making decisions for us. And I really believe that we need to put the government back into the hands of the people. And, I am very pro-union, and I am very invested in creating economic diversity in our state and making sure that we do put state and federal funds to help small business and business growth here in our state. There's so many things that we could do for our state. If we legalized and decriminalized cannabis, it would give us a great boost with our economy, and we see a boost within 6 to 8 months. Renewables have been proven to be viable here. We have a lot of hot spots for geothermal. This is the birthplace of rivers. With our dams, we could tap into hydropower. If we did have comprehensive broadband, and if it was a public utility, and if we had good roads, good schools, if we're paying our educators well, and our school service personnel, there's just so many things that we could do for West Virginia to invite business here. And our top industry is tourism. We could invest in the Reclaim Act. It would create jobs cleaning up the environment in the coal fields, and using the abandoned mine fund to clean up and create economic diversity and make sure that coal miners do have a job in the future. Like I said, there's just so many things. We just need visionaries for our future instead of visionaries for our demise. And we've not had a real talk about diversifying our economy. With the addiction epidemic, we need people that are already working in the front lines of our community, solving the problems. Drug-assisted therapy does play a role in ending addiction, but we need somebody that is just not totally visioned on drug replacement therapy, long-term recovery systems work, and there's so many things that we can do, but we cannot, people like my opponent who's funded by Big Pharma, we cannot rely on people like that to solve the addiction crisis, because the people that allowed to the pharmaceutical industry to send all this mass amount of pills into our communities, they're wanting to put that money right back into the pharmaceutical industry instead of actually solving the problem. And I'm an unforgiving advocate for Medicare for all. And the reason is it's been proven that it would save this country money. And I really believe that healthcare is a right. And there's so many people in this country that have insurance and still can't go to the doctor. The bulk of our population in our state is elderly. We have a lot of sick people because of black lung disease, cancer, asthma, cardiovascular disease, et cetera, et cetera. And so the bulk of our population is on Medicare, Medicaid already. And small businesses are having a hard time even pre-COVID to survive. And if they didn't have to carry the burden of high premiums for their insurance premiums for the employees, they could put that money back into their business and back into their employees, and they could grow, that would help them sustain and grow here in West Virginia. But, it's just, we're at a point now to where we need people that are not out of touch of our day-to-day struggles. And I believe that people in front of the pain need to be in front of the power. We know what it's like to struggle day to day. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And we can't rely on people that are totally out of touch on what we deal with on a day-to-day basis and expect them to make decisions for us. And it's important to me, if I do go to Congress, to make sure that I am accessible to the people that I'm supposed to serve, and everybody has a seat at the table and helping me write legislation that impacts our daily life. We don't need saviors. We need to invest in ourselves. We're in the fight for our lives, and we need to take care of each other. We actually have candidates that actually want to be public servants and have sacrificed and run for office so we can create a government that makes sure that we're not 49th and 50th in opportunity anymore, and West Virginia has a chance to grow.
Wow, that's a long list of motivating reasons why to run. Just before we get into the questions, I appreciate that the various reasons on why you're running. Could you just name the top 3 priorities? Because it's so difficult to focus on the long litany of things that we could improve on in the state, but your comments were well appreciated. And if you could just summarize and say, what do you think are the top 3 priorities of all those that you mentioned for this region?
Well, number 1 is economic diversity. And you can go to our website now. We've already put together a broadband proposal for our state and how we could implement it to make it a public utility. And economic diversity is coming soon with those proposals on our website, as well as putting federal funding into ending the addiction epidemic. That's number 2 for me. And one of the first things going into Congress, I would co-sponsor Medicare for all and start pushing to make sure, us being one of the richest countries in the world, that everybody has access to health care.
Good, thank you. Libby, are you ready to start the questions?
Yes, and thank you so much, Ms. Swearengin, for sharing your vision with us. And I did want to just send a friendly reminder that each answer should be approximately 2 minutes. You mentioned quite a bit that you were active and concerned about economic diversity, and I know that you have some information out there about diversity for West Virginia and some of the things that you are thinking about. However, what specifically would you do for Northern West Virginia residents and the folks that live in the Morgantown area to help diversify and grow the economy?
Well, like I said a while ago, there's so many things that we can do. And one of the things that I would do first would be introduce legislation and making sure that we put grant money and federal funding into our state to diversify our economy. I'm not sure if I even mentioned hemp a while ago too. That's something that farmers are already doing, growing hemp in our state. So we can tap into the agriculture of that. But the path to creating economic diversity is putting funding into our state, passing the Reclaim Act, using the AML funds to, to restructure our workforce. But we just have to have the money and the incentive to do it. And also working with people on a state level. I'm as a federal incumbent, if I'm in Congress, to ensure that that money is spent in our state in the right way to create economic diversity.
Thank you. One more quick question. How do you plan to encourage employers to close the gap for opportunity seekers and specifically people who have historically faced social injustice or been ignored and overlooked in the workforce?
Well, we have to make sure that we keep on pushing for equality. And it also starts with us across the state and just being the West Virginians that I know and actually do love. I know that we are some of the most hospitable people in the world. But as a federal candidate, I would definitely be pushing to make sure that everybody is created equally and everybody has equal opportunity.
Thank you so much. Dan, did you have a couple of questions?
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit on your comments on one of your priorities, the economic diversity, and you also mentioned the broadband. In this region, in the north central West Virginia area, as you know, we've had the shutdown of schools, and that sort of augments the division between the haves and the have-nots, and that the students that have financial resources generally have no trouble connecting to Wi-Fi and are not having trouble getting their virtual schools lessons to them in their own homes, whereas those kids that are less financially secure, and that typically is in the western part of Monongalia County. We've got some commissioners that are working diligently to try to find ways to provide the Wi-Fi access, the broadband at speeds that would allow them to, receive videos that aren't interrupted and jittery for their lessons. And there's in many places virtually no Wi-Fi reception or broadband available in the western part. And I speak like Blacksville High School would be a good example. Can you elaborate a little bit about the various mechanisms that the federal government would have in order to provide funding for small businesses that need connection to broadband, and the school system as well, the individual people, so that if we continue in a long term without having real face-to-face schooling, these maybe economically challenged students won't be left behind because they don't have the ability to tap into their virtual classrooms anymore.
Yeah, this is actually an issue across the entire state. And it really, shows that Capito Connect shows how disconnected she is. We have seen state and federal funding come into our state to make sure that we have good high-speed internet and comprehensive broadband, and that money was spent out of state. And
How so is that?
well, with Frontier Communications, they did get state and federal fundings when Joe Manchin was governor. And I heard that was one of the reasons the Frontier workers were on strike, is because they did not have the tools they said they were tired of putting Band-Aids on lines, especially after we had state and federal funding. And actually, Frontier did actually use that money out of state instead of actually spending it here. So we have to make sure that broadband is a public utility. We have seen, not only with our educational system as we advance into digital learning pre-COVID, but it ties into our infrastructure as well as our communications. We do need high-speed service, and in creating a public utility, it ensures that everybody has access to it. Low-income families should be able to afford it, and small businesses. And people that are on Social Security, veterans benefits, and that are disabled should have free access. And that's one of the things that I want to implement in the plan, and putting federal funding into our state to create comprehensive broadband. We've been promised for a long time, and we just haven't gotten it. And this really solidifies that we need some people that are going to really put their foot down and make sure that we do expand broadband services, make them accessible, and make sure that we have good quality internet across the state.
Yeah, there's a major project that's been underway for at least a year and probably will continue for 2 or 3 more years. It's the Upshur County Development Authority. They received federal funding for the purpose of improving broadband throughout the state. Are you familiar with that funding?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
No, okay. So that's one, and that is focused mostly on, there's different methods of delivering broadband. It can be done in the ground with fiber cable optics. It can be done on poles with fiber cable optics, and then it can be done with those large towers. And the Upshur County Development Authority is already has constructed and completed 3 what they call backbone towers, and those are 300 plus foot, very vertical towers. They're not real wide at the base. They're tied in with wires, and then there's a bunch of feeder towers that go into them. So that's a project that is presently underway, but I'm not sure. We might need some more expertise as to determine what is the best mechanism. If you have a limited amount of funding, it is expensive to get this network in the ground. But how do you decide between cables, in the ground, on the poles, and the right of ways that are needed to maybe follow the roads versus the tower system with the challenging topography, because you might not get into the hollows that way? It can be somewhat of an overwhelming bit of information that needs to be gathered for that to occur. So I guess a follow-up question would be, how would you propose getting broadband as a public utility, and how would that make things easier or more efficient for the state in broadband, referring to broadband?
Well, it's because we're selling to the highest bidder. And also if it's not a public utility, then we can be overcharged, right, for broadband. And, it needs to, we need enough money, you're right, and decide whether we're going to put them on the ground or on poles, and making sure that everybody has access to it. But as a public utility, we can make sure and ensure that it's affordable and accessible, and people, these companies cannot price gouge, and it can be competitive, and making sure that people have access, and people are not overcharged for internet if it's a public utility.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One other area that I think lends toward one of your priorities in the diversity of business, economic diversity, relates to some of what's going on in the northern panhandle of West Virginia, and relating to the oil and gas industry, where we've got a cracker plant being built in Pennsylvania right across the border. Another one very likely to be built just across the river in Ohio, right across from Moundsville. And the economic diversity that would result from that would be all these various types of plastic companies that do plastics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I mean, hundreds of satellite companies would eventually locate here to use the pellets that are being produced by these cracker plants that are being built right now. How do you think that the federal government could encourage this type of activity to maybe occur quickly and be done so with the environmental impacts that everyone is concerned about, because it is a fossil fuel?
Well, state and federal funding, but also too, when we talk about economic growth, and us, me living in the coal fields, I've dealt with the environmental impacts of living around industry and making sure the industry is held accountable and responsible. And there's not a stream that's not been impacted in the southern part of the state because of coal pollution. And we have to make sure that these companies are good players in our communities and being sound, making sure that our communities are not polluted and we don't have to worry if our children are getting cancer if they're in our communities. And that's why I think it's so important to have economic diversity and having sustainable business here. But, we can push on a federal level to make sure that we create, that we help business that is going to settle here. But we also have to make sure that they're good players and they're giving back to our communities. They're not taking away from us and making sure jobs are local, but also taking care of the people that live around these businesses so it can be environmentally sound, that they don't pollute our water, don't pollute our air. And that's what's really frustrated me is we can't be a resource colony anymore, and I really think we are in our state. And it's like we're treated like collateral damage. It's always fossil fuels, and we can have more than that, and we deserve more than that. And if they are going to be in our state, they have to pay their share of fair taxes. Small business owners shouldn't be paying more than big industry, but they also need to be taking care of the communities that they're settling in.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the most recent legislative session that was back in February? I think Representative Hansen, who's from this area, was able to get a bill passed that for the first time in the history of West Virginia allowed for alternative energy. And I think it was specific to solar plants. I think they allowed a maximum of 10 or I think it was 20 megavolt power stations by solar panels, up to 5 of those. So you could have 5 solar power plants throughout the state providing renewable energy up to a maximum of 20 megavolts. And that's really not very big at all when you look at some of the other methods of producing electricity in the state. How do you think the federal government could help diversify the energy industry? Because many of the manufacturers that are looking to maybe expand oftentimes will ask, what does your state offer in renewable energies? Microsoft, some of the larger ones, won't even go to a state unless they can tap into a certain percentage of renewable energies.
Well, even with mountaintop removal sites, like I said, we could use hemp, but renewables could be used on those sites. And a lot of the industry owns a lot of the land across our state, and they leased land to the coal companies. Now they could lease that land to renewable energy companies and incentivize renewables to come into our state. And like I said, we can put federal grant money and federal money into our state to make that happen. But, geothermal, if, Google it, it's amazing. We have so many hot spots and potential for geothermal that really could help advance our state. As well, like I said earlier, hydropower, because we have so many dams across our state with our rivers that could implement that. I mean, we could be leaders still in energy across the country, but sustainable energy and renewable energy. And I think that we can set an example for the rest of the country. And you're right, it would invite business here if we had those type of things.
Mm-hmm. Libby, I think at one point you had talked about, or prior to this interview, we had talked about how the CARES Act, the money that is available to individual states, how that could be released or how it would be appropriately used. And maybe you could follow up on that discussion that we had, within the past week on asking Paula how she would approach maybe the federal government using the CARES Act money for maybe a broader range of uses.
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
No, go ahead, Libby, go ahead.
Okay, well, we did receive the CARES Act money, and some of that money has already been utilized or plans to utilize it for things that are not directly related to coronavirus. And we were just wondering if you had any ideas about that. And I'm speaking specifically of work on roadways?
Yeah, I'm equally frustrated. That was supposed to go into relief for personal protective equipment. It was supposed to help small business because we've seen so many small businesses close since COVID. You know, I don't know why our federal representatives are not pushing Jim Justice to use that money for what it's is used for. If I was in Congress, I'd be screaming to the mountaintops that that money should be going to help with actual relief across the state. But even, I don't know if you guys know, the HEROES Act, it sat on my opponent's desk for 3 months. And that was supposed to be, to send out a stimulus package to everybody, which was $1,200 and $1,200 per dependent, which I think we should be getting at least $2,000 a month. It was supposed to send money into small business. It was also just send money into communities that couldn't afford broadband. It's still not been passed. Our Congress went into recess. The Senate did until Labor Day, with that setting on my opponent's desk. And she was helping craft the HEALS Act, which was taking away the $600 benefit from hardworking Americans, and said it would not, it didn't, I'm sorry, it was an incentive for people to not go back to work. And I think that's kind of a slap in the face to hardworking Americans, because everybody's struggling right now. We know everybody wants to go back to work, but we are in the middle of an international pandemic. And if people did go back to work, in the HEALS Act, it says that, companies were not responsible if they force people back into unsafe conditions. And so it really solidifies that we need leaders that are going to be able to handle something like this. We were not prepared before this crisis, and we need people that are going to push to make sure that people have actual relief, instead of, Jim Justice saying he's going to put that on roads. We've been hearing about roads ever since he got elected, and we hear that from everybody that's going to be elected governor. But we do know with Jim Justice, with his, he's one of the biggest polluting coal barons in West Virginia. He makes sure that the roads are good around the Greenbrier, and he makes sure the roads are good around areas where, he's still pushing out coal, but he doesn't make sure that we have good roads in our communities across the rest of the state. And that money is not even supposed to be used for that. It's supposed to be used to make sure that we get relief during a pandemic, and I'm disgusted equally.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
I don't know if any of the other people have we received during this interview, have we received any questions from some of the other attendees here?
Not at this time. If anybody has a question they would like to ask, you can put it in the chat box.
Oh, okay. We do have about, I don't know, 15, 20 people that have joined us. If not, Eldon, I think we're right around almost 40 minutes. It's about 10 after 11, and maybe
Okay.
you
All
could.
right. I just want to, all right, I guess I'm back on. Thank you. I'd just like to ask Paula if you have any last minute things. We have many of our businesses, as throughout the state, are small businesses, or actually one owner businesses, single owner businesses, sole proprietors. Do you have one very brief, say 1 minute statement as to why, a burning statement you want to say why the partnership membership should focus on your candidacy?
Before she answers that, we did get a question in from Melissa.
Okay, well, we have some time before we give you that 1 minute statement and close.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It popped up on my screen very briefly and is not there anymore, but I think it dealt with broadband, and I think it had to do with the time frame.
Here it is, Dan. I could read it if you don't see it. I see it.
Yeah.
Online.
What would our proposed time frame for broadband across the state? What would it be? And I might be able to actually answer that, because Potesta and Associates is involved in installing broadband
Let's let Paula
infrastructure.
answer that. Let's Paula answer that.
Yeah, Paula, could you answer the time frame in getting broadband brought to individual homes for the purpose of small business development as well as the educational purposes?
Well, Daniel, that's probably something I need to hear from you because I'm not there yet and working with folks to make sure that it happens. So I really can't say that I can give a time frame, but I mean, we've been waiting for so long as ASAP, and we need somebody that actually is going to be there to implement it and work with folks to make sure that it is, it's not just a pipe dream. It's actually going to happen across every state.
Yeah, well, it is. It's complicated because the infrastructure can be there, but even with traditional electric lines, sometimes the infrastructure isn't able to carry the data or the amount of data, having a fast broadband versus a slow cantankerous that really doesn't help much when it comes to videos, that sort of thing. There are experts out there that can tell you that, yes, we have infrastructure that could get something to you, but it's not at the level that is needed for today's business or today's schooling system where you're using videos all the time and movies and streaming and that sort of thing. So if I would be able, I would guess in a nutshell, I would say this is not a time frame in weeks or months. It's probably a time frame in years, because the infrastructure needs to be developed, the funding needs to be approved. I mean, I think there's money there, but you have to basically, determine how it's going to be used and what methods to get it to various hollows in the southern part of the state, or various, are you going to use the right of ways along roads? Are you going to use the towers? That sort of thing requires a evaluation before you even start to move the earth.
Right.
So probably years, Melissa, if that helps at all.
There's another question, Dan. Go ahead with the questions. We have a little bit of time. Yeah.
I haven't seen a second one. Go ahead, Eldon.
Okay, you have another question from another viewer. You have a number of ambitious plans. How do you propose to fund all these initiatives?
Well, this is one of the richest countries in the world. We don't have a budgeting problem. We have a moral problem that creates a budgeting problem in our country. And, we need to make sure that we are taxing big corporations equally as we do small businesses, and small businesses should not be carrying the burden of paying higher taxes than larger corporations. And this is one of the richest countries in the world. And we just need people that are going to invest in small business and invest in us and invest in, everybody across the country. These are basic human rights. And it not only makes moral sense, like I said earlier, it makes economic sense, because happier and healthier people are more productive people. We just have a lot of greed within the structure of our government, and that's why our campaign is 100% people funded. And if I do go to Washington, I'll owe nobody except for the people that put me there, and that is y'all. People across the country have been have invested in this race, and it really humbles because people are looking at West Virginia right now, and even a lot of folks that have had to as an opportunity in our state, they've invested a lot of time to volunteer and donate to this campaign because they just want to come back home and they want their children to be able to. So it's just, like I said, it's not that we don't have the money. It's just that people do not want to invest in us. And this is a campaign about us finally investing in ourselves and having somebody that's going to sit down with folks like y'all to implement the plans that we want across this state and making sure that we have true representation.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions. I always like to allow the candidate, because I always think there's one burning thing in a candidate's mind. Having been a candidate myself in the past, there's one burning thing that they just didn't get to say. So I'll give you 1 minute to say that one burning thing that's in the back of your mind.
Well, y'all give me a lot of time, thank you, to say a whole lot, but to me, we're in the fight for our lives. And we have for a long time had to vote for the lesser of two evils. And we have a choice right now, y'all. And this country girl, to be honest with you, if you told me 15 years ago that I was going to be the Democratic nominee for United States Senate, I would have told you you were crazy. But this is about survival. And this is about us having true representation. And this should be looked at like a job interview. We should be vetting our candidates as much as possible. And it would be an honor for me to be a public servant because I am a mother and grandmother. And I worry about my children every day. And I'm going to fight for every child in this state, every child in this country as much as I'd fight for my children. That's why I got into this fight. And if I felt like that we were being served, then I wouldn't be going against Shelley Moore Capito right now. And I think things have gotten this hard for us, and we have choices. So talk to your neighbors, vote, and let's do this. Let's make sure that we put the hands of the government back into us and make sure that West Virginia has a chance to grow for a change.
We thank you very much, Paula Jean Swearengin. It's quite a privilege to have you come and appear and answer our questions. We work very hard for our membership to get the issues out, and we thank you for being willing to put yourself out there and to serve the public and to come and address our issues and our concerns. And I want to take this time to thank Dan and Libby for their effort and their work and their commitment to the partnership. I also want to recognize our board chair, Sarah Woodrum, to close our session. I want to remind everybody that this meeting will be on Facebook and for the public to see, and also on our website. But Sarah Woodrum, our board chair, if you will close our session, please. Morgantown Area Partnership Board, Sarah.
Thank you, Eldon. I'm in my car, so sorry I have had my camera off, but I want to thank Dan and Libby as well. I appreciate you guys in doing this today, but most of all, I want to thank our speaker. And most of all, I've listened and I really appreciate you outlining the reasons that you're running for office. I thoroughly enjoyed learning about your family because it told me a lot more about you. And really that because of them, you get the issues I think that the people on the front line are experiencing every day. And that resonated for me, especially because as a West Virginia native with kids in the school system and my extended family here in the state, I have great interest and concern for all of the issues that were outlined in this session. These are real issues and we have to solve them. And so I thank you for bringing them up to the forefront. Most importantly, and I know Eldon didn't want me to go on and on, I want to thank you on behalf of the MAP board. We appreciate you being here and educating us. And I wish you luck. And I think probably the most important thing you said in this session is that people need to get out there and vote. So people, please go vote. Thank you all.